The acts of the American Revolution. The last notes, we talked about the French and Indian War, and we talked about the effects of the French and Indian War. And one of those effects were taxes that King George III placed on the colonists to take care of the debt that came from the French and Indian War. So if you can remember, the French and Indian War was a war fought over land in the Ohio River Valley. The British and the colonists won this war, and after they won the war, the colonists had a change of mind. They thought to themselves, hey, we have now gained military skills, and so we had to fight again. We're able to fight. Again, the French and Indian War also caused a huge debt with Britain. One of the laws or restrictions that King George III put on the colonists after the French and Indian War was the Proclamation Line of 1763. King George III banned any settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. He wanted to keep control over the colonists and didn't want to offer them protection from the natives. So the colonists got upset because they just fought over all of this land right here, but yet King George III said you cannot cross this proclamation line. You must stay in this area right here. In addition to the proclamation line, in order to help gain money from the French and Indian War, King George III started putting taxes or acts on the colonists. One was the Navigation Act. This was designed to keep trade in England and support mercantilism. Mercantilism basically is getting profit for trade. Colonists could only trade goods with England. They could not trade with any other country. All colonial ships must stop in a British harbor before going to another country. So they could trade, but they must go through England first. Now, in addition to that, King George III put a tax on sugar. We all love something sweet, candy, anything with sugar. Cookies, we like that. So he decided to put a tax on sugar to help pay for the French and Indian War. So there was a tax on sugar, molasses, and anything shipped to the colonies from England. Again, the colonists did not like this. They were upset because there was no representation in the British government, in the parliament, to discuss what should be taxed and what shouldn't be taxed. And so this angered the colonists even more because they were not represented in the parliament. Stamp Act. King George III also put a tax on paper. He taxed all documents, newspapers, playing cards, and he forced the colonists to pay a special tax, and they had to put a stamp on it to prove that they had it. So anything printed, they had to pay this tax on it. Again, created to help pay for the French and Indian War. The colonists got upset and they told King George III, if you do not repeal this act, which was take back or stop, they will boycott all goods from England. Boycott means that you're not going to buy or purchase anything until a change has been made. It's a form of protest, and it worked. And King George III eventually repealed the Stamp Act. Next is the Quartering Act. The purpose of this was to keep troops in the colonies and reduce the cost of traveling. So in order to do this, the colonists had to put troops in their homes. They had to feed them and take care of them. So King George III did not give you grocery money and say, hey, here is a stipend, here's a little extra money to help you support the troops. I need for you to take care of these troops because I want to save money. And so you had to, if you're a colonist, you had to let the troops stay in your home. The Townshend Act. The Townshend Act put tax on goods such as paper, glass, paint, and tea. The revenue raised would be used to pay the salaries of the officers in the colony. So now you have the Quartering Act where you have to take care of them. Then you had a tax on things that you use all the time just to pay for them to be there. Again, these types of things angered the colonists. The Tea Act. The Townshend Act, some of these things were repealed, like the paper and glass. Some of these things, he said, okay, we'll take the tax off of these. But the colonists still smuggled in tea from other places. Tea was a very popular drink during this time. And they had this thing called writs of assistance, where there are search warrants that allowed British officials to search any place or seize anything at any time. They did not have to get your permission. They did not have to have probable cause. They could just come in your house and say, hey, I want to see if you're smuggling anything today, and they could do it. To protect the British tea merchants, only one company could sell tea in the colonies, and that was the East India Trading Company. They were the only company allowed to trade or sell tea. This is just like saying you can only get your tea from McDonald's. You cannot get your tea from any other place, just this one place, which was the East India Trading Company. Of course, the colonists did not like this, and they decided to dump tea into the Boston Harbor, and that's known as the Boston Tea Party. They had this group of men called the Sons of Liberty who dressed up like Native Americans, and then they dumped all of this tea into the harbor. It's like, okay, King George, if you want to put these taxes on us, that's fine. We're just going to dump all your tea in the harbor. Now deal with that. King George III to say, okay, y'all did that. So I'm going to put you on the Intolerables Act. And this was designed to punish the colonists for the Boston Tea Party. The colonists could not have town meetings, and Boston was under strict military rule. King George and the Parliament tried to isolate Massachusetts, but this only strengthened the colony's unity. So he tried to keep Boston and Massachusetts away from all of the other colonies, and they're like, no, you can't keep doing these things to us, King George. So this just made them stronger. And then the colonists decided to meet in Philadelphia to boycott. Remember, boycott is to stop purchasing anything as a form of protest. So when you start messing with people's money, usually they are willing to listen. So they were met in Philadelphia to boycott all trade with Britain until the Intolerables Act was repealed. So these are the acts of the American Revolution. These were taxes and things placed on the colonists because of the French and Indian War. So make sure you have these things down in your notes. Might help for you to draw pictures to help represent some of these acts so you can remember them when we talk about them in class.